You know that feeling when you're home alone at night? Every little creak, every shadow, can make your heart jump. Now, imagine you're just trying to relax, but something outside your window keeps messing with your head, playing a terrifying game with you. This first story comes from a guy named Mark. He lived in a quiet house in the suburbs with a big, inviting porch. One evening, he was finally winding down after a long day, watching a movie in his cozy living room. He'd just settled onto the couch when, out of nowhere, his porch light flashed on, then immediately clicked off again. Mark barely noticed it at first. He thought, maybe a power flicker. He glanced towards the window, saw nothing unusual, and the light stayed off. He shrugged it off and went back to his movie. But then, just about 10 minutes later, it happened again. On, then off. This time, Mark felt a little prickle of unease. It wasn't a random flicker, it was a definite, deliberate turning on and then off. He paused his movie and walked over to the front door. He slowly opened it and peered out onto his porch and front yard. The night was still. No cars driving by, no people walking past, just the soft chirping of crickets. Everything looked perfectly normal. For a moment, he thought maybe it was just a faulty bulb. To be safe, he reached up and manually switched the porch light on, making sure it stayed on this time. It felt a bit better, having that light banishing some of the darkness. He went back to the living room, a little more watchful now. Just as he was about to sit down, a cold wave washed over him. The light clicked off. Mark froze mid-step. He knew he'd left it on. His heart started pounding like a drum in his chest. He slowly, quietly, crept back to the window overlooking the porch, barely daring to breathe. He pressed his face close to the glass, trying to pierce through the darkness, straining his eyes to see if anyone was out there. Then, just as his eyes adjusted to the gloomy shadows, he saw it. A shape. A dark, shifting shadow, barely visible, darting away from the very edge of his porch. It moved incredibly fast, slipping silently behind a large, overgrown bush at the side of his yard. It was gone in an instant, but Mark had seen it. It was too big to be an animal. It was a person. Someone had been there, on his porch, playing with his light, and then they had run. Terror shot through him. He immediately flew into action, locking all his doors and windows, checking them twice, even though he knew it was probably too late if someone wanted to get in. "Hello?" he called out, his voice shaking. "Is anyone out there? Show yourself." There was no reply, only the heavy silence of the night. That night, Mark didn't sleep a wink. He sat up, every muscle tense, staring out into the darkness, wondering who, or what, had been on his porch, playing those terrifying games with his light, and if they would come back. The thought that someone had been so close, just out of sight, was almost unbearable. What would you do if someone was playing a terrifying game with your lights from just outside your home, proving they were there, watching you? Imagine being deep asleep, tucked safely into your bed, feeling completely secure. It's the dead of night, pitch black outside, without a sound. Then, suddenly, bam! 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 Someone is pounding on your front door with incredible force, hard enough to shake your entire house. You jump out of bed, adrenaline surging, and rush to the window, but when you look out, there's absolutely no one there. This chilling experience happened to Sarah, who lived alone in a house far out in the peaceful countryside. She loved the quiet, the isolation, and the feeling of being completely away from the city's noise. One night, around 3 a.m., she was violently woken from a deep sleep by incredibly loud, frantic, and aggressive knocking on her front door. It wasn't just a polite tap, it sounded like someone was desperate, even furious, to get inside. Sarah, terrified but also worried that someone might be in trouble, slowly, cautiously got out of bed. Her heart was racing a mile a minute. She crept through her dark house to her living room window, which looked directly out onto her long, gravel driveway. She carefully peeled back a corner of the blinds, shaking as she peered out. Nothing. Just the dark, winding driveway stretching out to the main road, and the endless fields beyond. No car lights, no person standing there, no sign of anyone who could have made that earth-shattering noise. She stood there for a long minute, waiting, listening. The silence was absolute. She thought maybe she had dreamt it, or perhaps it was just the wind playing tricks on her old house. Still feeling uneasy, she went back to bed, though sleep was now impossible. But then, the very next night, it happened again. Just as loud, just as frantic, the knocking started right on schedule around 3 a.m. Sarah jumped up, a scream catching in her throat. This terrifying routine continued for 3 nights in a row. Every single night, around 3 a.m., the same intense, desperate pounding would begin, lasting for a minute or two before suddenly stopping. Sarah was exhausted, terrified, and starting to feel like she was losing her mind. On the 4th night, she was already wide awake, dreading the inevitable sound. When the knocking started, she instinctively pressed her ear against the cool wood of the door, trying to hear anything else, any footsteps, any breathing. That's when she heard it. A low, raspy whisper, right on the other side of the door. It was too faint to make out actual words, but it sounded like someone was breathing heavily, slowly, as if they were just waiting there, inches from her face. Sarah let out a choked cry, stumbled back, grabbed her phone, and frantically called the police. But by the time they arrived, 20 minutes later, the knocking had stopped, and of course, no one was found. The police searched the property, found nothing, and left, politely suggesting that perhaps she was just a bit stressed. Sarah knew better. She moved out of that house a week later. She couldn't shake the chilling feeling that whatever was outside her door wasn't trying to leave. It was just trying to get in. How would you ever feel safe in your own home again if someone, or something, kept trying to pound its way inside, night after night? We all trust our pets, don't we? Especially our dogs. They're part of the family, our loyal companions, and often, our protectors. So, what happens when your brave, fearless dog suddenly becomes absolutely terrified, whimpering and shaking, staring intently at something you can't even see, just outside your window? This last, very unsettling story comes from Michael, who lived in a house with a large, fenced backyard. He had a magnificent German shepherd named Buster. Buster was a true guardian, big, strong, and absolutely fearless. Nothing seemed to scare him. Until one quiet evening. Michael was relaxing in his living room, reading a book, with Buster sleeping peacefully by his feet, occasionally twitching in a dream. Suddenly, Buster's ears perked straight up. He lifted his head, his eyes fixed on the back door that led to the yard. A low, deep, guttural growl rumbled from his chest. It was a sound Michael had rarely heard, a warning growl. Then, to Michael's shock, Buster started to whimper, a small, scared sound, something Michael had never heard from him. The large dog slowly, reluctantly, tried to back away from the door, pressing himself against Michael's legs, trembling from head to paw. Michael, confused and concerned, looked at the back door. There was nothing there. He slowly got up and went to the window, peering out into his backyard. It was dark, but the yard light provided enough illumination for him to see clearly. No animals, no people, nothing moving. Yet, Buster was still utterly terrified, shaking uncontrollably, his eyes wide with fear, fixed intently on the darkness outside the window. He was trying to burrow behind Michael, whimpering softly. Michael felt a cold dread begin to creep over him. If Buster, his normally fearless guardian, was this scared, there had to be something truly terrifying out there, something that Michael couldn't see. Later that night, long after Michael had finally managed to get Buster somewhat settled and lying quietly, though still watchful, he heard it. A faint, dragging sound coming from just outside his house, near the back wall. It sounded like something heavy being slowly pulled across the grass, a rough, scraping noise. It went on for what felt like forever, a few unsettling minutes, then abruptly stopped. Silence returned, heavy and oppressive. Michael stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Buster's low, uneasy growls from his dog bed. The next morning, as soon as the sun was up, Michael rushed outside to check. His stomach dropped when he saw them. There were strange, deep scratch marks on the lower part of his back doorframe, right where Buster had been staring. They weren't from a clawed animal he knew, and they were too high for a normal dog to make. They looked like something had been trying to dig or pry its way in. Whatever had been outside, whatever had terrified Buster to his core, had clearly tried very hard to get inside. If your own pet, your most trusted companion, was clearly telling you something chilling was right outside your home, something you couldn't see, what would you do? Would you trust their instincts, or try to find a logical explanation for the unexplained?